learning to use some of these video conferencing products. I'm going to ask Craig to help me in the background by keeping people muted unless they need to speak for some reason. You can, as you see, you can raise your hand. We got a chat window, that sort of thing. We also want to be mindful of your time and keep this as efficient and meaningful as possible. So the reason for the call today, very quickly, is that there is a grant that we found out about really just a few weeks ago. We've been heavily involved for the last couple of years in campus security, and we believe that there needs to be a unified or a comprehensive approach to planning your campus security as far as integrating the different pieces together so you get the most benefit out of that technology. We know it's challenging to find the funding that you need for all the pieces. So we've made it our job to go and look for funding for you for these types of technologies for your school district. And we really want to go after this call today in two pieces. We don't have a lot of time for an awful lot of interaction from you, but we're trying to emphasize to you that this is a grant that's available. There's no match. The person with the grant team is going to explain that more in a minute. It is time sensitive. The grant is due on June the 9th, I believe. So if you're interested, you're going to need to speak up pretty quickly. We're going to try to cover what is the grant, what are the technologies that you can apply for with the grant, how do those work together, and then finally, if you're interested, what do you do next? Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this moving. So I'm going to ask Andrew Henshaw to take over next. He's with a company called Learn Design Apply, and he's going to tell us about the grant in general. So Andy, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then when you get done, if you'll hand it over to Ty. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Alan, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. So as Alan has said, this program is going to be due on June 9th. So we have just about a little over 4 weeks to complete a grant application, either with you guys doing the writing, or if you choose to do so, we can provide a grant writer on your behalf. So just to go through a little bit of the high level details for this program, this is offered through the Department of Justice and more specifically the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And the program is called the Stop School Violence Program. You guys may have also heard of a program called the COPS SVPP. I'll explain the differences between the two and how they might be able to link together toward the end of this description. But for now, we'll dig into the details of the Stop School Violence Program. So the award information here, you can see that there's up to $750,000 available for units of local government. And that does include school districts, law enforcement, and municipalities. If there's any interest in having a primary applicant come forward that isn't the school district necessarily, you are welcome to do that through the municipality or the law enforcement department. As Alan had mentioned as well, there is 0% match requirement here, which makes it extremely appealing. You know, with budgets that can often you know, exceed your ability to match funding even for some of these pieces of technology and equipment. The 0% match is a great opportunity for you to kind of get what you need, as opposed to having to make funding priorities or sacrifices in that regard. Moving on to the program purpose. So the idea for this grant is to improve school safety in two major buckets. The first is to train school personnel and to educate students on preventing violence. And then the one that we're actually kind of going through in more detail through this webinar today is to develop and implement threat assessments and intervention teams, and to be able to share information in active situations. So Ty will be able to get into that a little bit more. Just to go back up to the top of this page here real quick, the program period is going to be 36 months long. So it's over the course of 3 years that you can expend those funds, and that you'll need to track and report your performance metrics. So looking at the key areas of focus for this program, we're going to be focused on rurality, poverty, and opportunity zones. And you don't necessarily need to qualify for all three or even any of them, depending on how competitive the funding is for this round. But those three areas, if you qualify for any of them, provide your application with additional priority ranking during the evaluation process. So I've mentioned what they ask for each program, or sorry, for each program focus. You're going to need to demonstrate the unique challenges you face as a rural school district or municipality or law enforcement group. That could be time to get to the school for first responders and law enforcement, or just general, I guess, maybe lack of funds, lack of tax base. If you're in an incredibly impoverished rural district, that can be, kind of cover two of those categories. Moving into poverty, we're looking at a poverty rate of 20% or greater, as they've specified for the program details here. And then the last is a little bit more difficult to find, just with a general search, but there is a searchable map online where you can look to see each of your physical locations within your school district that might fit into an opportunity zone. And then just going through the final requirements here for the application. Again, if you choose to do this in-house, or we can provide a grant writer for you, there's going to be a project abstract, which isn't too difficult. It's only 400 words or less. The project narrative, which is 10 double-spaced pages, which outlines your current issues that you're facing, the design and implementation of the solution that kind of remedies those issues, the capabilities and competencies of your team, the core team that you're putting together, as well as the linkage to law enforcement and potentially first responders, and then a plan to sustain the effort after the funding is done. We also have a budget narrative, which will be kind of completed as a core team. Once we get the solutions specific to your school, we can go over that, and that's something that I would be willing to do on your behalf. And then lastly, we're looking at the memorandum of understanding. So very similar to a letter of support, we're going to be looking at outlining the roles and responsibilities that your core team is going to be completing over the course of the 3 years, and then how that can engage your law enforcement partner as well. So with that being said, I think I can switch this over to Ty to give a little bit more of an overview on the technology and equipment side of things, so we can kind of wrap this all together.
Great. Thank you very much, Andy. If you can unshare your screen or stop share on your part, I'll be glad to take over. Thanks for everybody attending today. We appreciate your interest in this. This is something that we've been working with InCare technology now a couple of weeks, I guess, and trying to develop a comprehensive solution to active shooter scenarios. The primary grant focus is the active shooter scenario. However, as a subset of that, there are some other benefits that we're about to go over. So I'm going to try to go a little slower than normal, maybe because some of this stuff is a little bit complex, but I'm also going to try to keep it as simplified as we possibly can. So let me pick my screen I'm going to share with first. And hopefully y'all can see that. Is that the right screen? Somebody?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. Normally it lights up on my monitor and tells me it's the right screen, but sometimes it doesn't. So the heart of the system, and it's a comprehensive system, I even kind of call it, it's a technology ecosphere that kind of incorporates multiple infrastructure within the campus of a given school. And it's going to be this irregardless of the type of product you have now for intercom or for camera or for access control. It's sort of an agnostic product that sits at the center of this, or the heart of all this is the Icon Signals platform and software and server, which is linked to a secondary server that provides location services. More or less, you can consider it GPS tracking within the school campus itself. So those two things sitting at the heart of it are what are interconnected with all the various systems that we're going to be talking about slowly, including your security camera system, your access control for locking down your doors, your paging equipment for making loudspeaker paging announcements, as well as strobes that you will see flashing in the hallways, etc. So the question becomes, what actually, gets this whole thing rolling? What makes it all work? And how do we get notification that there's been an event occur? So the key part of all of it is right here. This is what we call a 2-button pendant. It also can have a belt clip, so it can just sit on your side. And we're anticipating on the several quotes that we've developed already that all teachers will be given one of these devices. All admin staff, maybe volunteers in the school, maybe bus duty folks, put 2 or 3 in the office because teachers may have left them in their classroom. So we'll put 2 or 3 at the front desk for bus duty to be able to have, we've got to be able to cover periods before school and after school. We actually, for those of you in the state of Alabama may know, Montgomery, Alabama had a preschool, prior to school, bus line child drop-off shooting, active shooter scenario on 2 schools side by side in 2019, just a year ago. And it was quite scary for all of them. So including the bus duty folks, coaches, teachers, admin, custodial staff, perhaps. Some have mentioned maybe volunteers, even if you got PTA president that's on the campus every day or something like that, some volunteers potentially. They will have one of these. If an event occurs, let's hope and pray you never have active shooter scenario. If an event occurs, I'm going to go through the scenarios over here back on the lockdown flow chart of what happens. But let's start with, again, active shooter scenario. We hope and pray never happens to your campus or your school. But you have to be equipped. You have to have quick response. These are expensive systems, expensive technology. That's why the federal government has stepped up and said they'll help with funding up to $750,000. But what can we do really on a weekly basis? Some of the other functionality related to this can be this left button right here could be for medical alert. So anytime something happens on the campus where maybe someone's having an epileptic seizure, maybe someone's choking in the cafeteria, whatever may be going on, a press of the left button will then activate the system, and this device that started the whole ball rolling will communicate, you see the green arrow, to the central heart, and it will then send messages out to cell phones via SMS text messages and emails to the team that was already previously determined to be the medical intervention team. That might be a first responder that's on your staff that works, that's the volunteer fire department. It might be someone that works in the National Guard as a medic. Whatever, you have to find those members that by area of the school is what we would recommend, is like the first floor of the east wing. So when a medical occurs over there, maybe someone fell down the stairs and they're unconscious in the stairwell. The medical team can then be notified, including admin, of course, and they can respond very quickly instead of going, where's it at? What happened? Who, where, what, when? Well, I missed it and I never knew anything about it. Pushing that button will trigger the notification to all of the people that need to be notified, including the school nurse, etc. So that's kind of the base level or the basic thing that we see being used, more times than any of the other functions. So that's a level 1 or a type 1 medical response. Going back to the pendant again, the right side button, we're kind of looking at that as being what we consider to be the fight situation. Fight's broken out, we need a school resource officer. It could be a student that's no longer taking verbal commands from the teacher. It could be a number of scenarios that fall under, hey, I need admin assistance, I need SRO, whatever it might be, but you're putting that in the hands of the teacher so they can quickly summon help from teachers right next door, might be in her group when she presses the button, from admin, from of course, with a fight, be SRO notifications. In Alabama, we call those school resource officers. I don't know if all states use the same, lingo there, but basically your on-campus security guards would be notified of the fight if you press the right button. So the left was for medical, the right button would be for fight, And again, going back over here, various folks are notified in terms of that type of alert, and they're separate and completely customizable and programmable items for each different scenario. The second scenario would also be required to notify, in order to be qualified for the Stop Violence program, you have to notify off-site police or sheriff. So some of the recipients of the messaging through text or email messaging will actually be your local law enforcement. Andy already mentioned or made reference to the letters of support from your local law enforcement that will be needed to be collected in the short period of time to make sure everybody's on board with understanding. They're likely going to need to have 6 to 10 people for every school that should be getting the notification on the police side of the cell phones with texting and or emailing notifications. So that covers number 1 and number 2. Number 3, going back over here to the button again, is when an active shooter or an intruder is on campus. There's been some discussion about, do we do it when it's an intruder or do we do it when it's an active shooter? Well, we also discovered or discussed and finally came to the conclusion that every active shooter was an intruder before they pulled out the gun and started shooting. So intruder, active shooter scenario is essentially the same thing. Teachers or whomever has one of these in their hand will press both buttons simultaneously using 2 fingers to press and hold both buttons. That will activate the highest level of alerting back over to the flow chart that not only includes what I've talked about previously with different groups of messaging through emails and text messages, up to 1,000 text messages going out. It also will be interconnected with your various systems on the campus. It could be some product that we have already quoted you under the COPS program for new access control systems. It might be new security camera systems as part of the digital watchdog, or even new intercom systems. But if it's not our brand that's there right now today or under COPS grant application, we can still interface with the security camera system as long as they are IP-based cameras. We can interface with up to 10 of these that'll be strategically selected down the school hallways and areas that they'll be tied into the front desk computer, the principal's computer, the AP's computer, so that anytime an event occurs, they'll their screens will just be superimposed with the view of the camera most closely related to the clicker. Whoever clicked the button, let's say on the east hallway, the camera that's looking down that, my daughter's a teacher. She's been a teacher for 8 years. It's her 9th year. So if she presses the button, the camera looking past her classroom will be the one that's pulled up at the front desk with the information active shooter reported on that camera. Simultaneously to the messages going out, the video feed coming up, the access control system is notified through a relay control matrix. We use Altronics brand, will then notify, this is how it can be agnostic or not really matter what type of system. Your access control manufacturer will have the ability to sense an open and close relay contact or contact closure. We'll work with whoever that manufacturer is or your vendor is to ensure that when that happens, the button is pressed, the system recognized, the messages go out, the cameras are pulled up. We'll also tell the access control, hey, active shooter scenario, execute the protocol for active shooter, whatever that may be in your current system. If it's one of the new systems we've quoted, then we've got a higher level of integration available to us that does a lot more, has more functionality and features, but it's not dependent, this application or this solution is not dependent on you having that Pro Data Key access control, which is the current one we're selling. But it is going to have a higher level of integration, so it's a good thing if you applied for it in the COPS grant. Also, a paging announcement will go out campus-wide over the paging system through a pre-recorded announcement that's going to come from this system, the Icon Signal server, and go out over your current or existing paging system. Or if you have a Valcom new intercom system that we're quoting, it has as a feature its own messaging capability, and it will contain the pre-recorded messages, which will then be broadcast or announced all over the campus as active shooter, please shelter in place immediately, warning, active shooter, whatever the message might be, recorded by your personnel ahead of time as a pre-recorded message that is played. And last is the alert system right here that strobes will be flashing, probably yellow strobes. If you want blue or red, but the color is whatever you need. But I can envision yellow strobes flashing throughout the campus and hallways about every 100 feet. That's a requirement for ADA. So that the folks who didn't hear the announcement or didn't understand what's going on, or maybe you have a handicapped child that is hard of hearing, can see those lights, and they've previously drilled. You should drill on this at least once a year. Everybody be familiar with how it works and what it is. And that will notify those folks there. So that's kind of how the notification system works, being, all triggered basically from this press of one of these buttons through the system and activating and engaging all of the different disparate systems all under one all-encompassing overarching umbrella of the Icon Signals server. Optionally, I'll mention this, the smartphone app is available. We're not pricing those in every proposal unless specifically asked for that. That's an application. Up to 25 users can use their cell phone at a school to activate the lockdown, to turn off the lockdown, to report a medical issue, or whatever. It's just an app-driven, basically runs on the cell phone, Droid or iOS device. Those run about $3,000 per school. If you're interested in that, you can let us know that also. So I'll pause for a moment and take a quick drink and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, so while you do that, Ty, I'll just ask if anybody has a particular question, and Craig will continue to be the facilitator to help people be unmuted or.
Yeah, I was going to say if they're on a phone and I muted them, they may have to raise their hand or send me a chat
Right.
and unmute them.
Cool. So I think we're at a good place. We have a good a summary of what the grant is, what the technology is. Hopefully, if you're interested, that brings up quite a few questions in your mind. So let's just cover those one at a time, and we'll see where that leads. Hopefully, as we go through some of those, some of them will be your question.
And I'm going to monitor the chat. We have one here in the chat. Are the desk phones or the phone system included in this package, or can it be included in the budget?
Yes, so,
Alan, yeah, you want to get that?
yes, I will. So the whole emphasis of the program is the alert notification, right? So there's no doubt that you could include phone system or phones in that scenario if you're using them to get that word down to the classroom level and vice versa. So it's not a grant where you can say, oh, we just need a new phone system. I don't care about all this other stuff. Can you get me some new phone? No, that would not work. And that's the same scenario really as it has to do with the intercom. The intercom is just an extension of the ability to notify people. So it does fit in that context. Great question.
And Alan, just to build off of that and maybe kind of allude to the COPS program and maybe the differences between the two. So I heard a great way to say this is the Stop School Violence program would be anything that doesn't qualify as a target hardening sort of device or piece of technology. So cameras, let's say metal detectors, doors and locks, anything like that is going to be more a part of that COPS, School Violence Prevention Program. Although for the Stop School Violence Program, this method of integration can include the integration with those cameras and door locks.
And speaking of the integration with the cameras, Ty mentioned a quantity, which is our standard quantity that we include, and that's 10 cameras for each school or each site.
There's another question in the chat. It says, I understand this is for specific schools, but would the notifications or could they include a district too? And I'm not sure if they mean the district office probably.
Yeah, I expect they do, and if that's the case, it can include the district office.
Absolutely.
Really, one of the things you have to look at is, I have no idea how large your school districts are, but if you only did the alert notification piece, with the pendants and the icon signal server and all those pieces, the software, the different things that it takes to interface to your various technology. The average price for school is going to be somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 per school. So, if you have 20 schools, you're probably not going to be able to cover all 20 schools and address your phone needs or your intercom needs other than to interface to them. So, but on the other hand, you may have 4 schools and you may be able to address more things. So, and keep in mind, this is this grant occurs every year. So you may look at it on a part of your district this year, part the next year, however you need to do that. And, we hope that the government will continue to not only fund the program, but continue to increase the funding as they have been.
There's another good question in the chat. And by the way, anyone feel free to use the chat. That's fine. And if you'd rather not, use your mic. It says, Andy mentioned that this is a 3-year grant. Do you get funding each year, or as you implement your project, how often can you draw down funds?
Yeah, I'll just let Andy answer
I can take that.
Yeah, please.
Sure. So this is a quarterly drawdown, and it's reimbursement based. So on a quarterly basis, you'll be kind of delivering your financial report for where you're landing on the expenses that you've accrued as it relates to the program, and then you can deliver that report, and they'll reimburse you for those expenses.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question outside the chat window?
So Ty, I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot here. Just as it relates to the financial feasibility and what happens after the 3-year project period ends and those funds are no longer available. What are the annual maintenance costs and upkeep costs?
Well, that's a good question. I would say the predecessor to that is, are there any ongoing maintenance costs after the installation? And there are maintenance costs and licensing issues related to this solution that are ongoing each year, and they are already calculated and included in each of the proposals that we're doing for the 3-year period. Specifically, the answer to your question is what happens after that. Everyone will get a notification, typically prior to the expiration of the 3-year funding period. They'll get a notification that the warranty or the program funding is ending. If you would like to continue the maintenance, here is the offer for this X amount of dollars. You can have this. That currently for this system is, I don't really have a real good number to kind of say right off the top of my head. I'm thinking the manufacturer is in the $200 a month, range, $2,400, $2,500 a year, and the maintenance itself is probably going to be in the $3,000 a year range, just as a ballpark budgeting number, if you want to know that going forward. Of course, technology is changing so rapidly. Who knows what may be out there in 3 years. You may want to, replace it and go with something else. But maintenance will be made available throughout our network of dealers around the country and around the Southeast. If it's in the state of Alabama or Mississippi, Georgia, Tennessee, generally we can provide the service ourselves. But if it's outside of that area, we have network of dealers, 2 different networks that we work with to provide service on site.
Yeah, I'd like to just speak to that in one other vein, which is I like the fact that all the products that we have that are a part of this solution are manufacturers and companies that have been in business for years and years and are leaders in these fields. So Icon Signals has been around for over 20 years. Valcom, those are companies that are household names as it relates to technology and security. So regardless of the fact that our companies are fairly small, you're dealing with manufacturers that are national and global and been here for a long time, and so they're going to be there to support you as well as ourselves.
I have some other questions. Andy,
Sure.
can you speak a bit more about the report performance metrics?
Absolutely. So I just pulled this up in the full guidelines, the larger document. So what they're looking for is actually a pretty easy metric. It's just the percentage of schools with technology that is capable of sharing active situations. And if you want to dig into that a little bit deeper, you can track the type of situations that you have. But really, it's just kind of providing the percentage of schools that you're covering through this project and naming the specific types of technology that have been installed over the course of the 3 years.
Any other questions?
Craig, I think you're talking and you're on mute.
You're right. I just realized that. Thank you. Sorry. The next one is, can we be provided with estimated costs for the various components? I guess that means broken down into different pieces.
Right. So I'll let Ty speak to that mostly, but I mentioned a figure a minute ago from $80,000 to $100,000 per school for the alert notification piece. And that is a piece that would need to be a part of your solution in order to qualify for the grant. But then the two other main pieces that I'll let Ty answer if he wants to about either the intercom or phone piece, those would be two other potential areas that you might be interested in. So Ty, I'll turn that over to you.
Okay, the estimate that you provided is right on target with what we're seeing from a smaller school with, say, 50 teachers to a larger school with 80 teachers, in that price range. 90,000 is a good average. If you've got 5 schools, you better figure out 450,000 going towards that just for the alert notification. We cannot really develop the solution or the pricing detail until we know we have the maps. I'm going to go to the next step when I'm called on to do that, and I'll tell you what the next step is for us to develop the exact quotes for you, so you'll know the ballpark pricing. If you're trying to decide priorities, Alan and I are available we help people try to make judgment calls on, do I need to do intercom because I have no campus-wide paging system now to notify everyone, or do I need to do active shooter notification? If you want to help kind of speak to us after this meeting at some point, we can help you make those calls. Phone systems are available and are part of the project if it's interfaced or interconnected. On that school flow chart, the phone system is so well integrated that when someone makes a 911 call on your campus, it actually tells the system who did that, which extension made that call. So from a location analysis perspective, that's all built in to the phone system. So we have 2 districts I know we're pricing up phones for. In one case, we're actually not doing intercom. They chose to put a phone, a small basic phone in every classroom. And we did that for one school, or in the process of doing that, pricing up for one school. In another, we're just leaving the intercom in place and only providing schools for the administrative staff, coaches' offices, cafeteria, kitchen, the other things like that, and of course, central office. Either way that you would like to pursue that. Phone systems, they're not going to be as much as the alert notification, but I just would have to know some counts and some total number of actual stations you need. If you can keep it in the 100 total phone, I don't know what the size schools are, but We've noticed that my assistant and I were working on this week. There's a remote worker software program available, and you have to have a license for every telephone or every teacher off-site. The beauty of that solution is their cell phones that they're using at home, which all teachers, my daughter included, are working from home and calling parents and getting return calls at 10 o'clock at night, and they're not happy with that because their cell phones are out. The phone number will not be displayed as their personal cell phone. It will actually show the school's telephone number when teachers are making outbound calls to the students. So it's a very big feature and a nice integration package, in addition to some other benefits of collaboration and messaging and chatting within the campus and within the teacher network. There's a lot of that all-encompassing product that goes along with the telephones, and that might be something we can talk about outside the grant, might be something we can talk about inside the grant, but know that this particular integration from Alcatel-Lucent, the distributor is Icon for that nationwide, and they're also the manufacturer of the Icon Signals. I mean, Icon manufactured the Signals platform, so the integration is written very, very tightly and very nicely. So does that answer that question? You got another one, Craig?
I do. This might be more Andrew. Is the application originated from the district or from a specific school? The assumption, I guess, is that it would be the district who applies typically.
So it can be either. What I would say is you want to make sure that the applicant does have an active SAM registration and a DUNS number, as those two components will be definitely required before you can submit the grant. In this case, you can actually do sub-awardees as well for the grant funds. So if you wanted to form somewhat of a consortium between different school districts, the lead applicant would again have to have that active SAM and DUNS number, but they could create a subaward for the other schools that wanted to be involved.
Great. And just how competitive is the grant? What are the chances of getting funded based on past years and experience, and how much funding is available?
So this year there's $71.5 million. It's about a 50% increase from last year. What we noticed is that last year there were only $40 million worth of applications submitted for the $50 million total. However, this year they did a second solicitation for that remaining $10 million, and they received about $100 million worth of applications. And so we're seeing that they're probably ramping up their marketing efforts for this program. However, we're also forecasting, along with the greater funding, and then with this pandemic that's affecting administrations across the country, we're actually expecting kind of a lower volume of applications and therefore reduced competition for the funding.
Okay. There aren't any others in the chat window at the moment.
Everybody, my name is John Eiderscheid. I'm the grant writer for one of these projects in the School Violence Prevention Project. And it is regarding the grant. I just want to make sure everybody does know this is not just a technology solution. There are other aspects of this grant that are required by your school district. As far as threat assessment, training for staff, and bringing some student training in, and there's a possibility that you could get a person funded to coordinate all these activities for the 3-year term of the grant. Of course, that would take money away from your technology solutions, but if you're looking at an aspect of just putting in a grant just for the technology, it's not likely that would get funded. You do have this is for threat assessment. This is for helping your community and your school district learn better on how to recognize threatening behavior, recognizing when a student is starting to go down that path of retribution, and being able to recognize that sooner. So the training aspect of it is required, and it's really strongly suggested. So on a ballpark, depending on your district size, you could look at something like, to do the training and to do that meaningfully, you might spend $40,000 over 3 years to do that training. And if you were looking at a staff member to help coordinate that or not, a staff member at about $40,000 plus benefits could be funded. And so you're talking about right around under $200,000 for the other aspects of the grant that would be required. Obviously, if you're not looking for a staff member, that would be less. But you really do need the aspects of training staff to recognize that behavior, threat assessment teams at your buildings that are well trained in assessing when a student makes a threat and not if, but when. And then the other aspects of the possibilities of the other aspects of the grant as far as a staff member or not, really up to you. And then the money you don't use for that, you can obviously focus on your technology solutions that are being discussed by Alan and Craig.
Another question in the chat is, would this include social emotional learning solutions for PD and student engagement? I guess that's the grant itself.
Yeah, and you certainly want to, that'll be a part of that. And that's where, as far as grant writing services or Andy or all of us, Andy and I can help you towards some concepts, some best practices. There are actually best practices recommended by the Bureau of Justice that is sponsoring the grant. So some recommended solutions, or you might have an excellent solution that you're using in your community and you want to help fund that to do just those pieces, not to supplant, but to use that money to then grow that program, what you may have already in your district, which would be very unique. We want to make sure that if we're helping you with this grant, we want to really be specific to your community, your needs, and be written very differently than any other community grant that we would be involved with.
Anybody else have any questions that are not in the chat? So just another open-ended question. Does anybody have any comments about what you've heard today and how you think this fits in with what you're trying to achieve as a district? Be glad to get some feedback from you all. It's not every day we have this many people together from various school districts. Okay, so we've got just a few more minutes left here. I'm going to kick it back over to Ty and ask Ty to take a few minutes just to talk about what are the next steps, maybe the first 5 or so steps that, if you were interested in what you've heard today, what do you do to get going? Ty had already mentioned, I think, letting us know something by around the 14th, which is only a few days away. So Ty, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. I'll be happy to go over. We kind of created this document. We've get asked several times, what is the next step? So not only did we want to cover it verbally for 5 minutes, also you'll have this in writing. And if you'll ask your account manager to email this to you, they'll be happy to email you this document over. The next step for this 100% funding, remember there's no match requirement. So it's 100% federal funding up to the $750,000. As number one is to secure your grant writing fees. Andy's on here, can help with the fees. If you've already participated in COPS, it might not be the flat rate, $5,000, but those, that's important that you go secure that funding because that will be a cost that'll have to be paid upon a grant long before we'll know if you got an award or not. Number two, step 2, will your account manager at InCare Technologies of your interest in the program no later than next Thursday.
Hey, Todd,
1 week.
if I could interrupt you just briefly. You can choose to write your own grant, and Ty's organization will be glad to work with you and coach you through that process. That's just a decision you have to make. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Andy's organization can help them through. We'll give you advice if you choose not to use the grant writers with LDA. He'll help you work through that. That is an option. Number 2, email and let your account manager know of your interest in the program. by next Thursday so we can get you on the fast track for developing proposals. And then the next 3 steps are going to be for you guys to provide, or 4 steps. We're going to need from you, from each of the school districts that are interested, and it's not a lot of work, but it's some information we will need in order to develop the location services product and the alert notification devices. Number 3, provide total alert devices. Remember this picture over here I showed you. How many of these do you want to be distributed around the campus with the teachers, with the admin, et cetera? We're going to need to know all of those totaled up by school campus, please, and then summarized kind of in a summary form by district. We're estimating that you can get funding for somewhere around 8 of these schools, 8 schools, based on the average pricing, if that's all you did was alert notification during this round of grants. That's just a ballpark figure, but just so you know, that's kind of what we're looking at. Number 4, we would ask for you to provide us with floor plans to scale by school, each one of the schools, so that we can create the wireless network design and location services, as well as the alert notification and intercom if applicable. We will be doing intercom proposals for this grant as an extension, as we said, of the paging announcement, loudspeaker announcement system. So if it's not going to be to scale, which we've recognized that a lot of the school systems do not have scale drawings, if you would please just note on each hallway, normally each school has 5 or 6 or 7 hallways, just note the distance or the length of the hallways for us so we know some idea of the scale of the school. If you'll just put that on there for us, the hallway lengths, we can create the proposal from there. Number 5, if it is an intercom system that you're asking us to quote, I'll need a total number of classrooms. Like you got 40 classrooms, you got 35 classrooms, and any other areas like the gym, cafeteria, media center, locker rooms that will want a call button on the wall. And when we do the full intercom, there's a call button on the wall, typically by the door, that the teacher can press to call the front office, and there'll be a speaker up above that, a box speaker, and that's the Valcom ACS intercom system, and it works with call buttons. So I would need to know how many classrooms and how many total of those that you need. Don't worry about adding up the speakers. I'll figure that out. I'll do your audio layout of your speakers in the gym and the outside areas, 1 or 2 areas outside. I'll take care of that part. 6 is, what brand model do you have of equipment now at each school, by school? What do you have for paging and intercom? What do you have for access control? What do you have for security cameras at this time? And are the cameras IP based? That'll be important information for us in terms of developing the integration pricing models that we've got. So if you could provide that information for us, that would be helpful. We have had a few people who have said, well, we don't have a clue. But if you could just do a little research and try to figure it out, it would be very helpful for us in zooming in on a more accurate pricing model instead of taking a guess. It's something that might be $1,000 and we got to put 1,200 bucks in there because we're not sure. So help zero in on the pricing with that.
Just to follow up with what Ty's saying there is, that is important. All of that's so important to move ahead with quickly because the grant writers literally stuck to a certain degree until we get done with that process. So, and then just to try to keep on track with our time, you know, Andrew, if you could just take a minute and say what's expected after we submit the grant. You can quit sharing your screen there, Ty, if you like. But, you know, how long is it going to be before we hear something, and, you know, what's that process like, and that sort of thing?
So I actually attended a webinar for this program a couple of days ago, and they mentioned that at the very latest, you would receive notification of award by September 30th of this year. So it's a bit sooner than we expected for the typical federal programs that sometimes take 5 or 6 months for the award. This one would be about three to 4 months before the awards were announced. And after that, there would be kind of a paperwork cycle, which can take anywhere from 10 days to 4 weeks, depending on how swiftly you can get the information together and submit it on your school district's behalf.
And then, of course, your district's going to have to, at some point, also follow your local procurement cycle as well. Some states, like in Alabama, we do business in Alabama every day. Some of these products might be on a state contract, but most of them are not going to be. So you're going to have to work through that. So, realistically, you might be in a position where you could start some of these projects by the 1st of next year. And that's a good way to look at it. And I would say maybe even a more realistic view would be to get things turned up by the end of the school year and ready to get them into production, by the next fall. So I'm sure some districts will be more excited or anxious than others to move forward. We deal with that every day. So I think that's a good overview of everything we wanted to cover today. I don't want to keep everybody, and just keep the meeting going. So we do have we'll say maybe time for 2 more questions if somebody has thought of something else real quick. Otherwise, we want to try to wrap it up. Any other questions? Okay. Well, look, we appreciate your time, and if you're interested, just shoot an email or make a phone call to your InCare rep, and we will help you in every way we can to make sure that you're able to be successful. And we'll be emailing you some of this information that we talked about, particularly the next steps list and so forth, so you have that in your hands. Thanks to everybody for being with us today. We look forward to working with you. Have a blessed day.
Andy, are you still on? No, I guess he's gone.
Yes, sir.
You want me to do that other meeting we were talking about?
No, I think we're all good.
We're good with this one? Okay,
As long
great.
as we have this recording.